Try and remember the last movie you saw, TV show you've watched, or fictional book you've read. Chances are it follows the storytelling pattern known as the monomyth, or more widely known as the hero's journey. This thread runs through just about every popular work of fiction you and I have ever experienced. There's more to it, but in short, the hero's journey describes a story in which the protagonist is summoned to adventure, faces a dire challenge, then emerges victorious, having grown from the ordeal. The hero's journey is Chihiro's mythical bathhouse adventure in Spirited Away. It's the bride's redemption story in Kill Bill, Simba's return to the throne in The Lion King. The hero's journey is everywhere. So, some of the most compelling stories that have ever been told are those that have explored or deviated from the hero's journey stencil in some unique way. And one of the most powerful, genre-defining examples of this is a 26-episode show called Cowboy Bebop. As an episodic show, most of Cowboy Bebop's episodes are self-contained stories. And each of these stories, in a way, are heroes' journeys of their own. But where Cowboy Bebop breaks away from the classic template is through the character arc of its central protagonist, Spike. This isn't to say that the self-contained episodes aren't great. In fact, some of the show's most unforgettable moments are from the episodes that can just stand on their own. Realizing in episode 8 that Stella will never be able to see her brother again with her newly gained eyesight, for example, was one of the most heart-wrenching moments in the entire show for me. But what I want to focus on in this video are the episodes that are expressly dedicated to Spike's character arc. These are the episodes, in my opinion, that make Cowboy Bebop's approach to the hero's journey so brilliant. And this brilliance stems from the fact that when we're first introduced to Spike, he's not at the beginning of his hero's journey at all, whereas the standard protagonist would be. And this is made pretty clear in the very first episode. The opening shots of Asteroid Blues clearly tell the audience that Spike has a hefty, violent history. His call to adventure, the start of the hero's journey, they're all long buried in the past. This is what makes Spike such a geniusly written character. What's so compelling about his character arc isn't watching him jump through the steps of the hero's journey from start to finish. It's seeing him deal with the burden he's been carrying so that he can finally put his past behind him that makes Spike's hero's journey so gripping. This is especially important because for most of the series, Spike doesn't move forward in his hero's journey at all. Instead, he's in a strange sort of limbo, stuck halfway through the cycle. He's trapped in the step of the hero's journey called Crisis, where the protagonist must undergo death and rebirth to conquer their greatest enemy. It's the stage in which the hero is at their lowest point, even metaphorically dies. The hero then arises having triumphed over their weaknesses, so that they can complete their journey. You can see this step when the bride overcomes her panic and self-doubt to break out of the buried coffin in Kill Bill Volume 2. It's right there when Simba leaves behind his life of gluttony and cowardice and finally decides to return to Pride Rock.
I know what I have to do, but going back means I'll have to face my past. I've been running from it for so long.
And these aren't just a couple of cherry-picked examples. The stage of death and rebirth, often prompted by a re-examination of the past, is common throughout all of fiction. Which makes Cowboy Bebop so distinct since this metaphorical rebirth still hasn't happened with the Spike we're introduced to in episode 1, even though he's been at his lowest point for years. Instead of casting aside his fears and facing his history with the Syndicate, he's been avoiding his past. He's lost both his closest friend and the love of his life, and his ultimate conflict with the Syndicate is still unresolved. Spike's interaction with Laughing Bull in episode 1 makes this pretty clear.
The red-eyed coyote will appear in the Zona Norte at the far end of town. That is what I see.
A red-eyed coyote north of town?
You, swimming bird.
Huh?
The swimming bird will meet a woman. The bird will be hunted by this woman. And then death.
One more time.
What's that?
I was killed once before.
So, Spike is metaphorically dead from the very beginning of the show. And I think this is what he means when, all throughout, he says that he's stuck in a dream. How he reacts when he's faced with his past, then, is what makes the episodes I mentioned before so impactful. Those are the times when he's confronted with the opportunity to finally be reborn and finish his journey. And there's maybe no better example of this than Episode 5, Ballad of Fallen Angels. To start off, Episode 5 marks the introduction of Vicious, the main antagonist of the series. To me, Vicious represents everything Spike wants to leave behind. While Spike tries to flee the Syndicate, Vicious stays and continues to sink his claws deeper into the organization as the series progresses. It's fitting then that the scenes in which Spike actively confronts Vicious are some of the most meaningful moments in Spike's entire character arc. And Episode 5 builds up to this confrontation beautifully. From the very beginning of the episode, it's clear that Spike's past is dramatically affecting the way he's acting. You can see it in the way he disengages from his conversation with Jet about Mao Yenrai, someone who is obviously very important to Spike. And this scene perfectly mirrors the way Spike handles his history with the Syndicate. He doesn't want to come to terms with his metaphorical death by facing Vicious. This is the significance of the Ace of Spades card that shows up at the ending of the first act, at least the way I look at it. The Ace of Spades has a strong historical connection to death. It's even been called the Death card. It can definitely be interpreted a number of ways, but I think the card symbolizes Spike's current state in his hero's journey. He still hasn't been reborn, he's still dreaming. The episode develops this tension through the second act, during the scene with Vicious and Faye at the Opera House. This is where we, as the audience, are really made aware of the extent of Vicious's cold-bloodedness. It's especially important in understanding Spike and why he so desperately wants to leave his past behind. The animators even do a phenomenal job translating the horror of Spike's past through Faye's facial expressions. Small cues like these really set up the final act, as by this point it's clear that Spike and Vicious's paths are set to collide dramatically.
You get the point?
I don't want to do this, Jet.
Then why are you?
Let's just say my past is catching up to me.
And this takes us to the final act of the episode.
I don't feel a thing, and I stop remembering. The days are just like moments turned to hours. Mother used to say, if you want, you'll find a way.
This scene is such a huge part of what makes Spike's hero's journey so incredibly unique. Typically, in the hero's journey, this would be where the hero metaphorically dies and must be reborn to defeat their arch-nemesis. But by the time that this act arrives, Spike has already been dead for years. In this scene, he doesn't undergo some major transformation. He's not the fiercely determined protagonist that we're so used to seeing by this point of the hero's journey. Instead, Spike is weary. He's exhausted from the weight he's been carrying, and this only becomes clearer as the act reaches its most iconic scene. What's so unforgettable about this scene, aside from the incredible score and shot composition, is that this is our first real look into Spike's backstory. We've seen brief glimpses from episode 1, but this scene is where Spike's history is truly laid out for the first time. And as Spike continues to fall, we can finally understand, at least to some extent, why he's been avoiding his past for so long. It's unglamorous. It's bloody, characterized by the loss of friendship and love. And this information isn't spoon-fed to us via exposition either. In focusing on Spike's tired left eye, the camera makes it clear that he's seeing his past too. He's still unable to move past it, still stuck in the hero's journey, still short of the rebirth that would let him finish the cycle. It really is incredible how much this scene manages to convey without a single line of dialogue, and it's for good reason that it's widely regarded as one of the most iconic scenes in the entire show. And although the episode ends on a significantly lighter note, I think it's important to notice that Spike's place in the hero's journey still hasn't changed. I think that's why the episode ends the way it does, on another close-up shot of the Ace of Spades card. At least for the next few episodes, Spike will remain metaphorically dead, still dreaming. This is something that's almost never seen in fiction. After facing the ultimate villain, the hero almost always progresses through their journey in some significant way, whether they return home victorious or are forced to reevaluate themselves. But for Spike, life largely returns to normal. It's back to bell peppers and beef. But what the audience has learned about Spike through this episode remains, and it's what makes him feel like such a deeply nuanced character throughout the rest of the show. It also adds a staggering degree of tension to the other episodes involving Spike and Vicious, the next of which comes 7 episodes down the line. At first glance, episodes 12 and 13, titled Jupiter Jazz, might seem less significant to Spike's character than the other episodes involving Vicious. But it's through Jupiter Jazz that we learn more about one of the most clear-cut symbols of Spike's place in the hero's journey, his left eye. Through this eye, he can only see bits and pieces of his memories. In other words, Spike's left eye is a direct way of telling the audience that he literally can't leave his past behind. It's this information that makes a second viewing of the episode 5 scene so meaningful, since we now know that Spike is seeing those memories in real time. Jupiter Jazz also sheds light on Spike's relationship with Julia, which is a key factor regarding the weight that Spike has been carrying. But what I think is Jupiter Jazz's most important scene doesn't even feature Spike.
A star just fell from the sky.
That is not an ordinary star, my son. That star is the tear of a warrior.
What warrior is it?
A lost soul who has finished his battle somewhere on this planet.
Oh.
A pitiful soul who could not find his way to the lofty realm where the Great Spirit awaits us all.
Of course, it was Gren's star that Laughing Bull's son noticed. But the symbolism of the falling star is so significant to the end of Spike's journey, which comes at the very end of the show itself. But as of Jupiter Jazz, Spike's star still hasn't fallen, indicating that, unlike Gren, his journey isn't complete. The final 2 episodes of Cowboy Bebop, named The Real Folk Blues, are as perfect of an ending as any show could hope for. And it's mostly because they bring Spike's story to such an incredibly phenomenal close. This is what Spike's entire character arc has been gearing up for him to finally accept the burden of his past and complete his journey. And the first matter that has to be resolved is that of Julia. I swear I love Spike, but I honestly think that Julia kinda had to die for Spike's story to come to a believable close. It would have been almost too good to be true if Spike suddenly managed to convince himself, after years of running, that it was now time to face Vicious. Instead, it's Julia's death that prompts Spike to turn around and finally settle the demons of his past. It's powerfully believable. And Spike's final moments with Jet and Faye foreshadow this end of his journey flawlessly. First, Spike tells the story of the tiger-striped cat. This story perfectly captures Spike and his character arc. It's only after the white cat dies that the tiger-striped cat is able to close its eyes for good. Before that, the tiger-striped cat lived a million times and didn't even care much for its owners. In other words, it wasn't able to truly live or die, just like Spike in his limbo state of the hero's journey. But Julia is dead now, and all that's left before Spike can finally be done with the cycle is to confront Vicious. Spike, at long last, is awake.
I felt like I was watching a dream I'd never wake up from. before I knew it, the dream was all over.
And so, the show comes to its climax. I think it's so symbolic how blood completely covers Spike's left eye after his final confrontation with Vicious, to the point where his eye looks like it's not even there anymore. In other words, our hero is, at long last, done carrying the weight of his past. And as the camera pans up toward the stars, we're reminded of the following scene from earlier in the episode.
Guardian star, the star that warms this planet, is someone's guardian star as well. The red star you see overhead, the blue star on the horizon. And when a life ends, the star falls and disappears.
It's fitting then that the last shot from the entire show is of a disappearing star. It's Spike's star, and his hero's journey is finally over. There will never be another show like Cowboy Bebop. Since Spike's arc is grounded in the balance between death and rebirth, his entire internal struggle occurs within the confines of just a singular step of the hero's journey. The Spike we're introduced to in episode 1 has started this journey long before the first scene, and what drives the story forward is the building tension between him and the part of the cycle he's already completed or his past. This approach to character development really opened the eyes of viewers around the world to the storytelling potential of animation. Cowboy Bebop, in other words, is revolutionary. If you've somehow managed to wade through the sea of other great Cowboy Bebop videos to watch this one, thank you. This video was so much fun to make, and I'll definitely be back with another one soon. Till then, peace out.